Hello, my name is Joy Gilfilen with JoyTalk Radio, where we are people helping people to affect change in tumultuous and troubled times. With me tonight is my friend Chericka Ashmann, who has a background in complex post-traumatic stress disorder and therapy, and I'll let her tell you all of her titles and all that stuff later. But the bottom line is, I know that in Whatcom County right now and across the world, we are aware that we have a new presidential campaign coming up, and the election is going to happen tomorrow, it's going to happen on November 3rd. And the amount of stress and trauma that people are feeling going into the election is only part of the problem. People feel anxious depending on whether they support the Republican or the Democrat, the president past or the vice president past, who may be the president future. That's just one issue, but the outcome of that election is now going to release a pandemonium of follow-through emotions because of the pandemic and the social distancing and all the economic distress and all the other things that are bound up behind that. So we've got a civic shock, civic trauma, personal trauma situation that I wanted to interview someone who had some background in it, who could talk with us. And Sherika is an amazing human being who has learned so much about this issue, and she's one of the finest I've met who can be articulate to explain where we're coming from, what's going on right now, where we're going to from the standpoint of personal and emotional health and wellness. So welcome to Chericka. Please, thank you very much for being willing to talk with us tonight and tell us about yourself and what you think.
Thank you so much, Joy, for having me here. It's been a while since I've gotten to see you, so this is a delight because it's something I'm extremely passionate about. It's something that's really close to me, obviously. But yeah, my name is Chericka Ashmann. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I practice in the Bellingham area, although because of the pandemic, I have closed my office. I am strictly online, and I do some in-home visits with lots of precautions if that is necessary. I treat complex PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress. I also specialize in working with individuals who are on the spectrum.
On the spectrum of what?
Autism spectrum.
Okay, thank you.
The autism spectrum. I'm sorry. I need to be more clear about that. Yeah, and I've been in Bellingham for over 3 years now, and yeah, we are all going through a mass trauma together.
Yeah.
And, as this year has moved on, and we're almost in December now at the end of the year, which is really, in my own brain, it's really hard to understand like how we're already here. I've heard myself say many times, like, this is temporary, and I don't even know if it's fair for me to say that anymore because we don't know that it's temporary anymore.
Yeah, and I think on that note, I think that's really significant that you talk about that, because everybody thinks, well, somebody's going to save us or something's going to change, or no, this is an ongoing problem that may be going on. I mean, our world has changed, significantly changed, and there is no way that we're going back to pre-trauma. We have to adapt to a changed reality and a changed world. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. And I think what a lot of people don't understand, because hopefully it's because they haven't been put in the position where they need to understand trauma, because we don't want that to be anybody's reality. Although nobody is immune to it, is that, 2016 really was traumatic for a lot of people. At the end of the year, just after the election, we witnessed the highest surge of suicidal or calls for help due to suicidal ideation in history. And so if people think about 2016 and all of the things that happened in 2016 and compare that with, 2020, we're actually in an anniversary event, as if people are anticipating this thing again. So, you know, in 2016, I believe that we were at the tail end of the Ebola virus, which was a really scary thing that was taking lots of lives, and people were really unsure about how they were going to handle it and how to keep it contained. And we watched Africa be impacted really significantly by that. You know, we had police brutality in 2016. We had the Me Too movement in 2016. I mean, there have been multiple things that have occurred in 2016 that are also occurring this year. So people are feeling extra bad. Yes, yeah. And we had all those disasters. I mean, if you really could go in and map it out, you would see how many similarities there are. And as far as trauma goes, people probably don't realize like how traumatic 2016 was, but they are probably feeling it this year, and probably asking like, what is going on with me? Because not only do we have many events that are similar, we have an extra layer of pandemic on top of everything else, which has done so much in terms of isolating people from resources, from family, from friends, their natural support systems, their natural you know, coping mechanisms like swimming, for example, or things like that.
You can't do these things that are normal to you, that give you sensory action, and you don't get the hugs and you don't get the love. And we all know, I mean, we don't all know, but some of us know that if you don't get love and touch and stroking and compassion, people start to shrivel up and die emotionally. I mean, we actually need touch. We need affiliation. We need relationship. We need community around us in order for us to thrive. And
there's so much evidence for that. You know, that is touch is considered a basic need, just like food and water and shelter. Wow. Touch, sexual activity, all of those things. Those are basic human needs.
Yes.
We need those things. We need to be able to connect with people. And you're absolutely correct. We've seen this in studies that they did with, you know, infants who were in orphanages in Russia who did not receive touch, you know, had failure to thrive. We see this in our adult or in our senior population, where seniors are, you know, either moved in a scenario, or they lose members, or somehow they become isolated, and they also experience failure to thrive. And even now, present day, we have clinicians and we have doctors and we have all of these people who work with these populations and know what the challenges are, saying that this pandemic is not helping this issue. In fact, it's exacerbating it to a great degree.
Well, and actually all of these people who are our caregivers, and I want to talk about the first responders and the people who are working in the hospitals and the people who are working, I mean, think about it. They're being called out to have to show up to extreme conditions without nourishment back, with people not understanding the trauma that we ourselves are going through, the people that are going into the hospitals or into these care situations are going through, and no one's allowed to touch. Even when you go home, it's like this is creating fissures and fractures across our entire society. And so people are getting irritated. I mean, talk about some of the common experiences, if you will. You know, what is it that people feel, and why is this? Like, how do you know that you're experiencing trauma and that you're not just going crazy, and that it's not your fault that you're experiencing all this stuff? Because I think that's one of the biggest things, is when we start being irritable or we can't think straight and we've gone through trauma, we don't realize that that's not us at fault. It's not our fault. It's a phenomenon of the neural systems and the pathways of our body that are dealing with this shock. Right?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. It's a physiological response to the level of stress that people are experiencing. And one of those first things with, you know, enormous stress is that cognitive abilities begin to decline. And so you may feel disoriented, you may feel confused, you may have a hard time remembering things. You know, you may feel like you don't have motivation for anything. You may feel like you want to sleep all of the time. There are a number of things that can occur physiologically again, and just the physiological response can then create a mental response of like, what's wrong with me, right?
Yeah.
Because we live in a society that values productivity, and suddenly, you know, at the beginning of this, let's talk about the beginning of this, right? Everybody was all about like shopping, and I'm going to do all of these home repairs, and I'm going to, you know, I'm at home and I can't work, so I'm just going to do all of these projects and do all of these things. Well, that didn't last very long.
Well, and part of that is you lose your ability to track events and to make lists, and you lose your ability to even put things on calendars, and you get confused and you can't remember where you put that list or this list. I mean, the stuff adds up because it's sort of like the brain splits in the center. It's actually called split brain or broken brain or whatever whatever the professionals call it. But it really, when I started working with people who were dealing with this, who had come out of the prison system, it was like their reality had shifted so much they didn't recognize the arena that they were in, and they couldn't think straight anymore. And it was like you're living in a myth or a false reality, and this doesn't connect at the neural net, like at the base of your head. You know,
well, another way that the brain responds to stress is disassociation.
Okay.
And disassociation is, you know, everybody disassociates. Everybody in the general population disassociates.
Mm-hmm.
When there is so much stress that doesn't subside, and now think about this, we're 10 months in, you know, there are people who have been working, like me. I've been working the whole time. I've been working more than I have worked in a long time. And I'm working 6 days a week because there is such a need. And then there are people who aren't working at all and aren't able to get unemployment. So if you think about the length of time that people are under this amazing amount of stress, the brain starts to try to combat that by like, hey, we're just going to go ahead and disassociate you for a little bit because this is really awful. And like, we want to protect you. And what happens with disassociation is you're essentially checking out. This is more than just like, oh, I lost track of time for a couple of minutes. I mean, disassociation looks like all different kinds of things. Yeah. Disassociation can look like somebody, you know, watching, you know, 3 seasons of a television show on Hulu, you know, like straight through. Right.
And they lose days. They lose days. They can even lose weeks.
People can lose days, people can lose weeks, people can lose years. I treat complex PTSD, which typically involves pretty severe childhood trauma. And that is a very common thing where people are coming to me and saying, you know, I don't remember a lot about my childhood. And that's because they were likely disassociated, because that is their brain's response in protecting them. Right? It's like a shut off. So that's where, you know, you mentioned split brain. That's not really a term, but
that's what people call it.
I know what you say. Yes, I
feel like I have a split brain. Like,
and the reason for that is like, if you're disassociating, right, and you're disassociated all day long, and maybe somebody's given you important information, maybe you've signed up to complete some task, maybe, you know, you scheduled something, I don't know, and then you move into the next day and you don't recall that.
Yeah.
Then things start to get confusing. Like, what's going on with me, right? Yeah. The thing people need to keep in mind is that this is your brain's normal response. This is what your brain is supposed to be doing. Wow. However, your brain should not be doing this long term. Like, that's not, none of us can sustain this. None of this. Yeah. And there are so many people needing assistance that it becomes even more desperate, because now they recognize, like, something's happening to me. I don't feel good. I need help. And so, you know, everybody's telling everybody to reach out for help. The problem is that all of the therapists are overwhelmed. There
Yeah.
are lots of people not able to meet the need.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we have people just waiting, just kind of
Mm-hmm.
suffering without a lot of tools and resources.
Well, and one of the big problems we've got is that those of us who have been professionals, or those of us who have always been put together, like you can always do things, you're always safe, you're always okay. You know, everything has been cool and copacetic and perfect in your life. And on top of it, we have a culture that has taught everyone in business or anyone who wants to keep their job how to fake it till you make it. And so we fake it and we fake it.
Yeah.
And yet our brain is going, that's why the split brain thing, it's like, God, did that actually happen or didn't that happen? Was it a myth or was it a truth? And then when you have the media kicking in, you get really crazy in there. And because of isolation, we're not associating with other people around us. And so we're like going into this hyperventilation place. So to know that it's normal, I think, is really important. And then to take a breath and just go, yeah, this is real, is useful. And then we have to look at, this is happening while it's happening to me. What's happening to my brothers, sisters, sons, daughters, parents, bosses, associates? What's going on with them? Maybe that's why they're acting so crazy. Maybe that's why everybody's fighting. Maybe that's why we're not eating dinners at the right time and why things aren't working right. Maybe I should ask a question about how you're really doing, you know?
Yeah.
Because the ripple
Yeah.
effects are huge on all of us.
You know, and we just experienced a pretty great loss in our own community. And I think people are really confused about how a mental health clinician could possibly take their own life and the lives of their own child. And, you know, I'm sitting over here going, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
It's extreme stress.
It's extreme stress. And, you know, nobody's immune. These people, like myself, like I'm completely human. I experience everything that everybody else does.
Yes.
While I've had lots of my own personal treatment, I've done a lot of work on myself. You know, I have to be really diligent with my time, my energy, you know, who I'm seeing, for how long, how much I'm working, how I'm taking care of myself. And that's a lot of people. And this year, a lot of those ways that we naturally cope, like we said earlier, just got stripped away from us. Like all of a sudden, it's like, you're not only are going to be isolated, you also are not going to be able to rely on the things that you used previously to take care of yourself.
So if we could spin off of that, because, and I don't want you to talk about things that are going to stress you out even worse, because we're now talking in a public forum about these issues, and you're having, I mean, in your own life, you're dealing with emotions as you're talking to me, because you've got friends and family and people that are in your life that you're helping. Some of them aren't going to make it, and some of them will make it, but some of them are, I mean, they're going through trauma right now, and you are feeling those feelings. So what would you tell people right now? I mean, if you want to talk about how do you even feel doing this conference call? I mean, I think that might be a place to help people relate to, where do you start and how do you move?
How do I?
Yeah. How do
I feel about doing the conference call?
Yeah. And what do you have to do in order to keep yourself sane when you've got this public persona you're putting on? Like you need to have water, and you need to do your whatever. Just give us an idea of how do you cope as a human with the knowledge you have. How do you start this? And how do you stay sane while you're going through it?
I really, and I, you know, I'm a really transparent person. I really don't hold any shame anymore. But I mean, you and I both know, like we met because we had similar interests, but also because of my story. And I don't feel ashamed to share my story that I am a suicide survivor of 2016. I called for help and I ended up being arrested, and I was assaulted by police officers to the point that I was intubated when I woke up the next day. I had to serve time in jail. I had went through the court systems. I took myself out of the workforce. I just hit intensive therapy, intensive. I had always been aware that I'd had trauma. Cognitively, it didn't really bother me. It was something different. When 2016 began to get closer to the election, I started to just noticing like so much in my body, so much going on in my body. Like it almost felt like a constant vibration that I couldn't get rid of. That alone, like that doesn't sound super disturbing, right?
No, but
when
it's
it's
just
there
quiet.
all day, all the time, I couldn't sleep anymore. I was like working like crazy, single parent, living in Seattle with all the responsibility of owning a home and all of that stuff, not a huge support system. And, I wasn't even aware that I was actually experiencing suicidal ideation because it was so subtle. It was so subtle.
Creeped up on you a little bit at a
It
time.
totally creeped up on
Yeah.
me. And I just kept saying, I had a vacation planned for my two sons and I. It was all paid for in Hawaii. I think it was like a week after the actual incident happened. But I just kept thinking about that. I was actually reaching out to mental health therapists, much like people are trying to do today, to get help, and everybody was full. Or they would learn that I was a licensed clinician, and they would be like, well, I don't know if I want to take that case because I'm in the field. There's still stigma in my own profession around mental health issues.
Well, and people don't want to admit that somebody who's a clinician actually needs help. How could you possibly need help? You should be strong enough. You should be able to handle it. You know what's going on. Why can't you fix it yourself? I don't want that liability.
Yes. And I heard that a lot when I was trying to express that I don't feel well. I kept hearing like, you're the strongest person I know. You get through everything. And while that's true, I needed to be given a space to say like, I can't do this. I'm not okay. And so as I'm trying to tell multiple people, and I don't fault them, okay? Because they're not me. They're not mental health professionals. They don't know how to respond to this kind of thing. But as I'm doing that and I keep hearing back, it's like nobody can hear me.
Yeah.
And I just got to a point. I had a really horrible day, and it was one thing after another. And I never, I love my boys more than anything in the world. And I can't imagine leaving them.
Yeah.
And anybody who knows me and my kids and knows how close we are and that we're very involved and that I did a lot of raising them on my own, that for me to get to that point, that means something.
Yeah.
And so I had hoped that I would make it to the Hawaii, the trip. And I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't make it. Today, I feel so much better. In fact, this has not been too extraordinarily difficult for me.
Wow.
Because I'm prepared this year. Because I've done the work. Because I know what I'm looking at. I know what's happening with me constantly. I barely get any body sensations anymore at all.
And it's not because you're numb. It's because you're prepared.
It's not because I'm numb.
Yes.
It's because I resolved a lot of stuff with a really great evidence-based therapy. I essentially have rewired my brain and the way that I think about things. I have come to discover things about myself. Wednesday, I actually have a formal evaluation through the University of Washington for autism, which is something that had never been identified before, which made a huge difference in my life. It answered so many questions. Both of my sons are autistic. I always knew that, but I never considered myself, which is crazy when you think about how long I've been in the field.
But you're so functional. You're so functional. How could you possibly?
well, many people are functional
Yeah.
who have autism. Many people you would never even know, you know?
Mhm.
And, you know, that's the thing, is it's not a mental illness.
Right.
It's a difference in the way that our brains operate and process things.
Mhm.
However, we are considered minorities in terms of our brain function.
Mhm.
So other people who encounter us may perceive us in ways that are not really true to who we are as a person. And so then, you know, people are putting labels and they're telling you things about yourself that aren't true. And I've been able to just shed all of that and be like, no, that's not who I am. I actually, like, this is kind of how my brain works. And it's been a wonderful journey. It's been a really tough journey. It's been grueling at times. And I feel really good. I've had some moments. I would not say they're abnormal at all. You know, I've had it like a few days ago. I cried a little bit just thinking about like how many people are in pain. It was like
Mhm.
5 minutes. My kid sat by me. He like patted my arm. He listened, and it felt a lot better. So
Mhm.
what I would like to do is help people this evening, like roll it back, get super basic.
Excellent.
Like, listening is the best thing. Sometimes people just need you to just sit and hear them. Let them cry, let them shout, let them get frustrated, let them say things that you know maybe are stupid, irrational, whatever. Just let them get it out, because that is the body and the mind's way of just trying to regulate. Just get
Mhm.
it out. Just get it out. There's so many things, you know, as far as like quarantine, you know, and the limitation of being able to do activities and things like that. And, you know, people are, you know, they'll talk to you, they're like, I feel so bad. I'm like, when's the last time you took a shower?
You know, I mean, that's
Oh,
real. That's exactly the question.
for real. For real. They're like, oh my gosh, it's been 3 days. Okay. All I want you to do is try to bathe. Just take a shower and see if that doesn't help, right?
Take a
Or
bath.
take a bath. When's the last time you ate? Are you hydrating enough? You know, have you had fresh air? Have you moved from your room
Yes.
to a different room for a change of scenery? Have you stepped outside of your house? Have you gone on a walk recently? You know,
Have
they're
you
just,
talked to a real human being
have you
instead of
talked to,
gotten hooked to the TV?
yes. Well,
And have
even
you,
though TV can be helpful.
yes.
TV with media, with a lot of the news, I don't find that helpful. You know, another really basic thing is, you know, we don't have any control over the election other than our ability to vote. If
Yes.
you voted, my recommendation is get off of social media, stop watching the news, stop, get it out. You want to you want to limit input into your brain.
Well,
Your brain
and
can only process so much stuff.
and the other thing you can do, if it's, you know, it's like part of the idea of just shutting it off and getting off, that can also be a flight mechanism, and that can actually, I mean, I totally get that, but it's also
Mhm.
stop watching the things that are traumatizing you and start
Mhm.
watching things that can heal you. If you want to use the media, if you want to start pivoting so that you can feed good stuff in, you know,
Mhm.
start watching nature films, start watching things that bring life and hope and vitality back. Because
Mhm.
some people, they can't just shut off the TV, but stop shutting off the parts of the TV that are ruining you.
Right. Don't
You
watch
know,
Lifetime Movie Network where it shows like women getting assaulted and like just about every movie that they have. Like, stop
yeah,
watching that. You stop watching, you know, news uh, casts about coronavirus, you know, sharing information that is not really evidence-based at all. You know,
yeah.
stop watching that stuff. It's not useful for your brain. Just
It's not,
you don't need it. You don't
yeah,
need it.
not
Um,
now.
and so it's like a cleanse
Hmm.
essentially. And what's really nice about social media too, or I guess I should say technology, not social media so much, but technology in general has come a long way. And technology in terms of mental health is really ramping up. And I think, with everything that we experience like this, there's the good, there's the bad. We're in the bad right now, but I think everybody should be thinking about the good that will come out of all of this too. Because when we are stressed out, we are being asked to respond to something. Some people respond poorly. Some people respond with really great ideas. So things that people can access right now, which is really amazing, is there are all kinds of apps for anxiety, stress reduction, depression. And these are like evidence-based things that are created by psychologists that people can have at the touch of their fingers, right? So if you can't get into a therapist, look at all of the apps, read about them, read the reviews. Check them out. I think a lot of them are free. And
there's meditation.
Useful.
There's meditation tools. There's music videos that are intended to help heal these.
Oh yeah, music is so great.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And even with, I do EMDR, that's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's an evidence-based type of therapy that has been around for more than 30 years. There are other types of therapy in other different parts of the world that have very similar approaches and very similar results. So it's been around quite a while.
Sure.
And, before pandemic, it was thought that this was not something that you could ever deliver via online telehealth, right? Therapy. That has changed as well. And that's exciting for me as a clinician, because I was always concerned before about the lack of accessibility for EMDR.
Sure.
It's really kind of specialized. Not everybody is trained in it, although that is changing. There are more and more people now getting trained in it because of what's happening. But now that we can actually have a way to deliver it online is amazing. And it keeps me safe as a practitioner. I can still get just as good results. But these are just some of the things that happen and come out of tragic stuff.
Yeah. So EMDR, so tell people what they would look up if they were going to go online to try to get some help. Restate that phrase so they can hear it.
It's EMDR. It stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So when it was originally developed, Francine Shapiro is a woman. She has since passed, just last year, in fact. She noticed that eye movements back and forth while focusing on something troubling or upsetting would help alleviate the symptoms that she was experiencing. So she began to develop it, and today we have it's a very useful tool. And it's life-changing. It's what I sought out. And not only did I seek it out, but I was like, I'm going to get trained, I'm going to get certified. And now I'm on my way to learn to continue my certification so that I can start training other therapists how to do this. Awesome. And you can look it up. You can look up EMDR online. The EMDRIA Association, it's EMDR. That's the International Association.org. You can find clinicians there who are trained. You can find, there's 3 different levels. So you can put it in a search engine, but there are other really valuable types of therapies that have similar effects as well. There's like internal family systems. Now my mind's going to go blank because I'm like, okay, hold on a second.
There's also things like somatherapy, and there's behavioral health therapy that's emotion-based. There's laughter therapies. There's
art therapy. There's movement therapy. Yoga is considered a type of therapy, like in many ways. It's very useful for release of trauma. Yeah, there's all kinds of things. The problem is that I think people get really freaked out when they start experiencing things, and we still have stigma
Yes.
with mental health. And so
Yep.
people feel afraid to say, like, I'm struggling, I'm not okay, I'm not okay.
But it's normal to be distressed.
It's
I mean, you've
totally
got this
normal.
much stuff coming in, and it doesn't mean you're mentally ill. It means that your mind is trying to process, and the world is moving so fast around us today. There's so much stuff going on. It's incredible, the stuff that's coming in. So
It's
breathing
exactly.
and
Yes.
relaxing down into, okay, I'm just a body, and my body is dealing with all these inputs. And maybe I need to take a break right now and drink some good quality water, not alcohol and sugars and energy drinks. Don't hyper adrenalize yourself. That depletes you. Actually nourish your body. And then
Right.
eat food that is like real food, like some root vegetables and some carrots and celery and things that actually ground your body and pull it together, not sweets and sugars and pastas and, the stuff that just gunks you up. Bring some nutrition into your body so you can bring it down. I mean, I would imagine that you've learned a lot about how to do those things as an athlete yourself and a health practitioner. You've had to learn how to do those things, correct?
Absolutely. It
Okay.
matters. I mean, there's research stating that, what and how we eat, has a direct effect on how we feel physically. If we don't feel good physically, mentally, we're not going to fare so well either. There's so much research on, the body and mind connection and how trauma affects us physically.
Mm-hmm.
um, that I would love for there to be more avenues of education. I would love to see people being educated about this in school, and starting in elementary school. Little kids, they can learn these things. Just people have the capacity to take care of themselves. People have never been given the tools a lot of times to do that. It's too far away from them.
Mm-hmm. So specifically right now, if you were talking to a family, let's say a mom, and I've got kids, and suddenly they're all homebound and they're not able to go out and play, and they're not able to go do all the things that kids normally do. Not only is mom feeling stressed, the kids are feeling stress. And then if there's a dad, the dad's feeling stress. And if it's a dad with the kids, he's feeling stress. So what are some of the kinds of things, as a practical person, just right now in Bellingham, that the election's coming up and you got to watch it, and the fallout from the election for the next few weeks is going to be pretty significant. What are the things that you might do with your family and your children right now, or with your in-laws or whatever? What would you do in your circle of influence right now to start helping you and your family cope?
I think that this whole experience is really pushing people to evaluate their relationships. Very much so. In fact, evaluating them in such a way that, this doesn't benefit me, or why have I stayed in this relationship so long? I don't need it, right? What I would encourage families to do is focus on your kids, focus on your family, talk about how you're feeling. If you have a hard time talking about how you're feeling, go on the internet, pull off some charts off the internet about emotions, get an emotion chart, let it speak for you, point to it, say how you feel, let your kids express how they feel. If they don't know how to do it yet, help them draw faces, talk to them about it.
Yeah.
They have to be taught. They have to be taught how to say, what's going inside here, is how I feel, right? They have to be able to make that connection. And so many kids can't verbalize those things. So you get kids who are acting out physically. Maybe they're screaming. Maybe they're really irritable. Maybe they're having lots of tantrums. Maybe they're sleeping a lot. Maybe they just they're not up to doing anything. Like they oftentimes don't have the words for that. So, parents can really be helpful in those situations. Parents also, a really good way to teach your kids about feelings is to express your feelings in front of your kids. There's this huge misnomer that like you should never share negative feelings with your kids. First of all, no feelings are negative. Some feelings are really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And some feelings are really wonderful. You have to have all of it. You have to embrace all of it. You can't just like expect to be happy all at the time. That's not realistic. And that sets people up for failure. So the best things that parents can do is say like, I'm sad and this is why,
Yeah. And not blame it on the kids. That's the other one about this, learning to express the feelings, but not blaming other people for those feelings. I mean, that's one of the biggest problems we have in media is if I'm feeling bad, it must be your fault, or it's his fault, or it's the media's fault, or whatever. That's not necessarily useful. It's more useful to be able to say, I feel these feelings, and I just feel these feelings, and what can I do to help me feel these feelings and move these feelings through and give me something else to do next that is positive. That it's like, if you're drowning, notice that you're drowning and go, you know what, which direction is the fastest way to get out of the drowning? And is there a ladder, or is there a rope, or is there somebody, what can I do to get out of drowning? These are,
and I think,
like, it's not useful to yell at the guy that might've knocked you over the board. I mean, the fact is, he probably didn't intend to, but you're still in the water. Well, get out.
Yeah, and hearing you express that, right? It's like another scenario where like, well, that person is experiencing normal stuff from the stress that they're under. Is like they're just kind of snapping. The thing about feelings is that we do have control over our feelings, and that control, funny enough, is in our thoughts. It's how we think about things that actually creates how we feel about things. And many people get confused. You will hear people say this all the time, like, I feel like if I go to the store today that I am gonna run into people not wearing masks, and that's gonna make me mad. Well, that's not a feeling, that's a thought.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And it's future thinking of something that you don't even know is going to occur. And so now all of a sudden you're anxious, maybe a little frustrated before you're before you even are going out the gate. So people really need to think about how they're actually thinking about things. Is it rational? Is it factual? Is it logical?
Or is it a myth? Is it a myth?
Yeah.
And a boogeyman you made up? Yeah.
Or is it or is it something that somebody told you about yourself that's not necessarily true? Like, don't adopt things that other people are telling you,
One of the things I remember learning when I was a kid on the farm, and not to distract, but to illuminate what you're talking about. As a young girl on the farm, I was like 8 and 10 years old, and I'd have to climb up the mountains and go get the cows, and there'd be potential bear or cougar, or maybe the storm was coming, or maybe I had a horse that wasn't working right, and I'd have to go up there and I'd have to bring him down. And one of the things that I learned very quickly over time was that when I got into tense situations, or I had to go do something, I kept my wits about me. I kept present. I paid attention to what was in my mind. I paid attention to the smell, to the wind, to the horse, to the animals, to the sounds, to the weather changes, to what was going on. And I could not afford to be playing games in my mind as to what if they were going to come get me, and how bad would it hurt, and what's going to happen, and blah, 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 and what's going on in my other life. I had to stay present and accounted for, or I would get hurt because I was distracted by stuff that had nothing to do with what was here now.
Right.
And so I had to learn to be present. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what you're talking about, is learning to be present to what's going on in your body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just like we have an election in a few days. What day is it? It's Monday.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Yep.
this the 2nd?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's tomorrow,
Yeah.
and there's people just like, oh, this, and like the weeks that come, like we don't have any answer yet.
No.
And so it doesn't make sense to continue to just cycle on the
Yeah.
same things about it. You've got to figure out a way. I mean, I have techniques that I teach my own patients, right? Which is like
Mm-hmm.
compartmentalization,
Yeah.
Putting stuff in the container. Like, you almost want to check out right now from certain things, just to go ahead and save yourself a little bit.
Yeah. Not check out with drugs or those kinds of things, though. Check out, like, stop worrying about, I mean, we can't fix it at this point. It's like, that's over there, somebody else, that's going to happen, and there's going to be consequences. But you know what? Right now, I might want to call my mother-in-law or my child or my brother and see how they're doing. I might want to go buy some good solid groceries, because I really don't have good food in my house right now. And right now, I might want to go be looking for music that I can listen to or that I can share with somebody. And maybe there's some people I should write some notes to. I mean, what can I do to help me get through this part? And what am I looking at over the next 3 months? Because regardless of who gets elected, we're going to have some challenges ahead. And so how do I prepare myself and my family for that challenge? So is there anything? Yeah.
Well, I think you said it, is that, the preferences is, I mean, in a perfect pandemic world, right, is that people would be taking care of themselves and exercising the best way that they can and eating really good foods and keeping themselves sharp without using substances. And that is not people's reality. That is not so many people's reality, right? You have people who went into pandemic already suffering before this thing even hit, already struggling, already using substances. Some of those substances were prescribed to them. And so saying these things of like, just eat well and just get your sleep, that's a fine thing to do. And that's also, some people just can't do it. That is the nature of trauma. That is the nature of trauma. Where getting out of bed to brush your teeth can be as difficult as building a rocket ship.
Yeah. And so blaming people and yelling at them isn't going to
not helpful. It's not helpful.
And
everybody needs to lower their expectations exponentially. Like, again, go back to very basic stuff, Stop worrying about keeping up with the Joneses at this point.
And stop worrying about perfectionism and you should know how to do that. I mean, the fact is, we're here now. Be here now.
Yeah.
And adapt to here now, and be kind with yourself. Forgiveness, forgive other people for not being perfect too. And how can we help each other through it? The compassion, the forgiveness, the teamwork. That's what will get us through it. Is that?
Yeah. And I think there are really valuable things to learn from different populations. And one population in particular are those already living in poverty before this even happened.
Yes.
Because I don't think a lot has changed for them in terms of how they live. If you think about, their lack of access to resources, lack of social supports, you name it, like lack of financial assistance or financial support, you name it, they've already been doing that for a long time. And in the profession, my experience has been that some of these people, as many as hardships as they have, they've been the happiest I've ever encountered. And I say that honestly, because their environment their material items that they have, their jobs, none of that matters. What matters to them most are their connections, their relationships with people. And I think a lot of people too, you know, the stereotype is that, you know, these are bad families and, you know, they're really messed up people and they didn't do something right. But really it's a lot deeper than that. And sometimes that's just not, a lot of times that's just not true. They have just as much love to give as any of us do.
Mm-hmm.
That's their one thing that can't be taken from them. So they really value their relationships. And so I think that's what the society, a larger society as a whole, is learning.
Mm-hmm.
Although, you know, we have all of the other stuff there too. There's, you know,
it's
racism, brutality, all of that. Yeah.
It's interesting. There was a fellow that I met, and I'm forgetting his name at the moment. He's the author of a book called Breakfast at Sally's. And he went from being a millionaire, like a high-end millionaire, to the bottom of the barrel. He lost in a matter of months, or maybe it was a year. He lost his home, his family, his multi-million-dollar company, because he was in the encyclopedia business, I think it was. And as soon as the internet came, nobody needed, it was either encyclopedias or resources or telephone books or something like that. And suddenly there was no market. And he went from on top of the world to on the bottom of the world. And he's wandering around Bremerton and he's going, I don't get it. I just don't get it. His world was upside down, sideways, turned inside out. There was nothing that made sense to him. And he had to go back, and he was living homeless in the streets, and he had a dog. And he had to reorient himself to a whole new reality. And this book is a fascinating story about what it took for him to turn around. And what he said was, I realized at one point that all this stuff that I had in my world that I thought was so important just wasn't.
Yeah.
And he ended up living and going, and he got a typewriter. Somebody gave him a typewriter and he started writing, and that's where the Breakfast at Sally's book came from. But he said it was interesting how when I met people, some of the people who had less than I did would give me the extra $3 in gas that I needed, or somebody would give the shirt off of their back to the other person because that other person was in worse shape. And so the sharing and the illusions that we have about what's important changes. And so it's really important that we start living like human beings and bring our civic heart and our emotional heart and our heartfulness to the story and to the table and to the business and to whatever it is that we're doing, so we can get through this and heal our hearts and forgive, give forward what we can, because we can.
Yeah.
And you're a wonderful example, Sherika. You have been such a blessing. Is there something else you want to say on the show before we're complete about anything?
Well, it's nice to see you again. The last time I saw you, we were talking about your project.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's nice to see somebody who didn't come up through the field. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but has such a great awareness of the things that happen in our society and in our systems that keep people in positions of being disempowered. And, I really appreciate anybody who does that, whether it be for a living or whether it be in their spare time. It's absolutely important. We need to get back to helping our neighbor, accepting who we are, accepting other people for who they are. Stop judging. Stop. You have no idea what people's lives have been like. None. There's not one person who would look at me and think, oh, she's been to jail. Oh, she tried to take her own life. Oh, she's experienced police brutality. And that's just a tiny bit. That doesn't include all of the other traumas that I experienced in my lifetime.
Yeah.
And I love that because I love proving people wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong.
Yeah.
Stop assuming you know why this person is the way that they are. You have no clue. Focus on you. What are you doing? What are you thinking? How are your thoughts making you feel? How are your feelings making you respond to other people? If it's bad, go get some help. Go talk to somebody. There's a reason for it.
And go learn. Yeah.
Go learn. Go
And
learn. You don't have to live like that. That's the thing, is you don't have to live like that.
You know, it's funny. The reason I ended up meeting you is I did that study, 79 people that I interviewed that came out of the Whatcom County
Yes.
Jail. And
yeah.
53 were people who'd gone through the jail, and 26 of them or whatever were people that were first responders or family or loved ones. And I started interviewing them because I could not understand the disconnect between why do we do what we do in our civic system, and why do we not listen to the people who are going through that system to help bridge the gap. Because it's crazy that we have so many people experiencing mental illness. It's crazy that our nation is arresting 12 million people a year. It's just crazy that we do these things, and how can we fix it? So I went and I started to call and talk to them. And there were so many beliefs that I thought I had already gotten through, and that I already thought I knew how to help people, because we had been helping people through the coalition for a long time. I didn't know how many beliefs I had about people who were mentally ill, people who were criminals, people who had been arrested, the judges and everybody. And until I did it, like I ended up, I'm going to hold this up just for a second. It's the,
it's your amazing infogram. What are those called? Well, I forget what it's an infographic. Is that correct?
It's an infographic. Yes, it would be considered an infographic. And it's, I did this thing called the Whatcom County Jail Trauma Chart. And I called these people and I asked them, I said, we have helped you dig yourself out of a ditch that you've been in. And I'd like to know, I know it's really traumatizing to go back into the situation that put you in the jail in the first place, but would you be willing to go back and talk about what happened to you, so that we can learn how to change the system so we don't have to keep doing it? Would you be willing to go there? And it was really hard for people, because when you're in deep trauma, people don't want to talk about it. So, but they were willing to do it because it was to help other people and to change the system so other people wouldn't have to go through it. So what I found out from these interviews, I did this radicalized acute distress under duress. And there were a series of things that happened to people in a 911 incident, or an upset or an upheaval, when people would get upset with each other, or they think they were having a mental health breakdown and they didn't know what to do. And then there's another series of things that happened at the point of getting jailed and then judged and then going into the court system. And this whole thing, I'm not, you can go to the Restorative Community Coalition and download this. But when I showed it to you, Chericka, you went, "Oh, I get it. I love this." And it was really profound to me, because going through this process, it gave me such immense compassion for people who have gone through an upheaval that bucked them out of society, made them unemployable, made them mentally distressed and unable, cognitively broken, and things that were going on in their life that I had no understanding of. I didn't understand, except that I knew that people that I picked up that came out of the jail didn't want to talk about it. It's like, and then I started looking at the people who were the caregivers and why they ended up with the same kind of trauma. We looked at this side and I went, oh my God, they disassociate from the community because they have the belief that we're free, that everything's not free, freedom, that people take care of us, and we have all these beliefs about how the world's supposed to work. And suddenly when it doesn't work that way, we lose confidence in our support system. And then that breaks us up. And I think that's very similar to what we're dealing with right now, because our protectors are now, our president isn't necessarily concerned about public safety in the same way that we thought he was. We're not used to Congress not stepping up. We're not used to the world changing at the rate that it's changing. We're not used to police brutality. We're not used to the civil rights movement coming back up in our face again.
Mm-hmm.
And these things disassociate us, and they upset our underpinnings, our foundational belief of who we are and how we function.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we're dealing with now, is that a whole lot of people are experiencing things that are similar to what happens when you called 911, or you called to get help, or whatever. People can get in accidents, other people call to get help for them, and then the person who got in the accident can end up in the jail.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going, what happened that happened? That doesn't make any sense, but it happened anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have to move forward from that and say, how are we going to move to the next place from here? It doesn't matter that we're here. That's already gone. How are we going to move forward? So I'm so honored that you have been willing, and I don't have a right to be proud of you, but I'm proud of you anyway. Like, you
Thank
have
you.
a right to be proud of yourself. But the fact that you had the fortitude and the guts to go after it and go get trained and face these things head on, and then turn that massive liability and that massive situation that fell apart in your world, and you took it head on and you went, okay, what am I going to do with this? How am I going to turn this into an asset? How am I going to reclaim my kids and my life and my surroundings? How am I going to rebuild myself? You
Mm-hmm.
took peace building to a whole new level of making peace in your own heart and soul, making peace with your sons, with your life, with your friends, your colleagues, your relationships, making peace with the society that we live in today. And
I'm not at peace with our society yet. I am still looking at these systems, and I am still fighting some really good fights.
But that's what I mean.
And I will not stop. I am definitely,
The peace, I don't mean peace as in neutral, it's okay, blasé. I mean peace in, you're at peace with the fact that you're not okay with it where it is. And you're at peace with the fact that you're working to change it. And that's the kind of peace I'm talking about.
Yes, that is, yes.
Yeah, so
yes.
Thank you.
Well, thank you
so much.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and I honor the work you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'm
Good
having
night.
really great successes with my patients. I will say that.
Good.
This is a time where you just cannot get away from it. It's all up in there in your face, and what better time than to just address it.
And so, anytime you're ready to speak at another level, you tell me, give me a call, and we'll put you back up. Okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Yep, bye. Awesome.